Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today we're rounding up the SuperCoach previews for 2017 as we cap it off with the Dogs, the reigning premiers. And if you haven't caught up with any of these previews, of course you're a bit late to the party, but feel free to catch up with all of those over the last about a month or so now. But we just take a bit of a broad look at all the club's options, whether it be a breakout contender, someone coming back from injury, or just a guy that's probably worth discussing for our SuperCoach sides for whatever reason. Now, the Dogs certainly offer a fair few reasonably good choices, I think, and there'll be certainly a few guys that feature in our sides, but one man that will absolutely be a big talking point for years to come is Marcus Bontempelli. Now, a lot of people just think Bontempelli, think Brownlow medalist, think next superstar, and it's hard to argue with that. But I guess the question we've really got to raise is he going to explode into that next bracket in 2017? Last year, averaged 107.7, so you'll have to pay $586,000 for him. Now, the year before, 103.2, so he built a little bit on that. Now, of course, we all saw him in the grand final. We all saw him produce his best footy in big moments. He's not a massive ball winner either, so if you're wondering where will these extra points come from, he only averaged 24.4 touches a game, kicks a goal a game. You know, he's more than capable going forward, being such a tall player, your modern day midfielder as they say, tackles hard, wins clearances, and above all, he is a big game player and a big moment player, which I think is very important and something that can add a little extra to your selections when you look particularly in the midfield. He's not just a guy who's a great player, but when the game's on the line, he's at the forefront, and I think Bontempelli certainly showed that he was that type of player throughout the season. Now, is he currently in my side? No. Has he featured in my side throughout the pre-season? Definitely. He's been in and out a couple of times, and the only thing that's slightly scaring me off is his age and his games. Now, I guess 63 games is reasonable, but the fella's only 21. He's going to take on a lot more responsibility next year, and I think will cop even more attention. I think at times, you know, with such a dynamic midfield the Dogs have, which they'll still have next year, but I think Bontempelli will certainly gather far more attention as the main man in the Dogs midfield. And as another year goes on, clubs look further into him and ways they can quell his influence and ways you can get on top of him, whether it be a tag or playing someone offensively through him. And I just think, as I say with a lot of podcasts and a lot of guys, when we're paying about your 600k mark, you got to be absolutely sold. There's got to be ideally no doubt surrounding their selection, and if there is, very slight and minimal doubt. And I'd have to say there's probably minimal doubt surrounding Bontempelli, but there's certainly some cause for discussion over, will he get more attention? Can he continue to develop at that bigger rate? Is he capable as a 21, 22-year-old of averaging 110 plus? We all saw his grand final performance. It was outstanding. If I'm saying pick him or not, I'm probably somewhat on the fence, but certainly leaning more towards pick him. I think he's a pretty impressive fella off the ground as well, which suggests that he'll cope pretty well with that expectation, which he has already. The only concern, as I said, is that when we put around this sort of money and pay that sort of coin, we've got to really know that we're going to get results. Now, I think worst case scenario, we're probably going to see an average around about the same mark that he did last year, which you'd be disappointed with, but it wouldn't be a disaster. So I think if you like Bontempelli, if you think he's destined to be a superstar, as many believe, and I think, you know, he absolutely is a star already, but your absolute top end, right up there in the Brownlow and things like that, and in a top handful of midfielders, well, the question's probably not if, but when, and I suppose we'll be wondering whether that's going to be 2017. So I guess that's probably going to be something that people consider throughout the pre-season with quite a bit of debate and quite a bit of interest, because the upside could be huge, but also, you know, a lot of expectation, and can he back it up? Can he handle it? Can he break 110? questions that we should discuss. So another guy is Matty Boyd. Now, he's been a favourite for a long time. Of course, surprised many last year. I mean, averaging 103.7. I mean, he's long been a great scorer for us. Averaged 100 plus since 2009, with the only exception being in 2014 where he averaged 97.9. Of course, he was previously a fantastic midfielder for the Dogs. Averaged big numbers and was an unassuming type, but certainly got the job done week in, week out. He's managed to reinvent himself with all these young guys coming through the midfield and a need for good ball use, and perhaps with injuries out of necessity went to the back half. And he certainly has delivered. I mean, a couple of great years from the back line, and had an even better season this year, I think, just because he did have that bit more opportunity and responsibility as Johannesson and, of course, Rob Murphy went down. You'll have to pay a fair bit amount for him, $564,000. Of course, he's as reliable as they come, but I just think at 34 years old, the fact that Johannesson looks to be even taking more of a mantle, as he showed early last season, and the return of Murphy. Will as much ball come through Boyd? Will there be as much of a need for him to be that designated guy? We'll have to wait and see, but I think I'll probably be steering clear of Boydie for this season, just because, as we discussed with a guy like Rewalt, they're superstars, but there's just that chance, and there's always that year that they do drop off, and you never want to pick a guy just because they've had a great track record, and then you pick him and he has that year where he does slow down and he does drop off a little bit. So there's always that fear when guys get to that sort of stage in their careers, and I think it's very valid for Matty Boyd. Been a great fantasy player for us a long time, but I don't think you'll be selecting him. Particularly, we have a fair few other options in our backline to pick from, who are guys who are really in the prime of their careers and peaking, where I don't think we're going to see any better numbers from Boydie. He may average mid to high 90s, which is still fairly impressive, but there is more of a risk that he could drop off significantly as compared to, say, a Doherty or someone like that. I mean, Doherty may drop off as well, but it's not going to be as significantly, and he is even a chance to, go just as good, because he is in that peak of his career and still building as a footballer, where Boyd, perhaps in the last year or two, certainly the twilight of his career. So just a couple of things to keep an eye out for. Two dogs that I certainly think will be in a lot of teams, Luke Dalhouse and Jack McRae. Of course, you can both get them as forwards, which is huge for us, and no doubt they'll be extremely popular. As far as I'm concerned, Lukey Dalhouse is simply a lock. He's probably my first pick player. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. I think he's a star. Just finds his way to score points, whether he's not racking up pill, whether he's not kicking goals or laying tackles. He just finds it very difficult to have a poor game. Last year, of course, injured in round 12, I think it was. Only played the 18% game time, where he scored about 29 against Port Adelaide. Returned in round 19 and just had a bit of a slow end to the season. Had some good finals, but we probably didn't see that consistent game-breaking form that we saw in the first half of the year and 2015. First 11 games of last year, produced 7 tons and 3 80-plus games. So he's consistent, a very good player, and a guy that I think is very hard to tag and probably won't draw a tag anyway. You'll have to pay $520K for him. We know he can do big numbers, average 104.5 in 2015, so I don't think I have to convince too many people about Lukey Dalhouse. He's an outstanding player in a great side, knows what he's doing. I mean, he plays his role brilliantly, whether it's off more of a half-forward flank, in and under, just has a happy knack of scoring points, and is a big game player. I don't think he probably gets as much credit as to how well he does perform in big moments, and I think would be one of the Doggies fans' most favourite players and most reliable players with Dalhouse. So Jack McRae probably hasn't received as much love. He's certainly got a lot of love, but a few people probably raise a few more question marks about McRae, and understandably, only averaged the 94.4 last year, I think it was, 94.1 even, and that was off 2 years of averaging basically 3 figures, 99.9 and 100.1. Why was the drop off? Well, I think just naturally didn't have as good a year. He does turn the ball over a little bit, maybe a little bit more sloppy than some other guys, but certainly finds the pill at will. I mean, unbelievable at racking the ball up. 39 touches against the Hawks in the final, and then he had 33 in the grand final and 112 SuperCoach points. So he's the sort of guy that you don't put in work to, he'll destroy and is easily capable of getting 40 touches. Now I just can't go past him. I mean, the fact that he's young, an improving player, and I reckon we can bank on him to get back to around that 3 figures, if not averaging your early 100s. He's an extremely talented player, a hard runner, and does have a very nice left foot kick, just can be scrappy at times from what I've seen. Average 105.5 through the 4 finals, so ended the year well, which should surely do his confidence the world of good. And I think McRae is definitely one that we'll see in many forward lines, and rightly so. Any chance that we get to jump at a midfielder in our forward lines, we should certainly jump at. And the fact that he's on the improve in a quality side, he's long been touted as an extremely good player and has lived up to that. He's had down stages at times. He has been dropped from the Dogs for, I think, work rate, and his inside ball has been questioned at times. He's certainly a different player to Dalhouse. McRae will get a lot more easy possession on the outside, but you got to have both to have a good side, and I think McRae complements the likes of Libba and Dalhouse extremely well. So McRae will be in my team, barring injury, and I think he should be in yours. So a couple more Dogs to talk about. As I mentioned earlier with Boyd, Jason Johannesson is a guy who will certainly prick the ears up of many. And personally, I'm not as sold on him. You'll have to pay $13,000 for him after averaging 94.4. Now, of course, he started last season absolutely fantastically, averaging 105 over the first 4 rounds. Even in that 4th game, he only played about 51% of game time for a score of 97. So he was on his way to another huge 120, 130 score until he did get that injury, hamstring I think it was, but he certainly started last season in an absolute blaze of glory. Now, can he get back to that sort of form? Because I must say, he trailed off a little bit as the averages, I guess, suggest. I mean, he did drop off ever so slightly, and as you do when you come back from injury, it's hard to just pick up from where you left off. Had a great pre-season last year, hit the ground running in round 1, and then after returning had to work his way back into it a bit. But as we know, he won the Norm Smith, had a great game, penetrating kick, inside 50s, the works, was fantastic with his run. I'm not fully sold on him though. I don't think we're going to see unbelievable numbers. I think he obviously is capable of it. I think he's a very good player, but I just feel even his Norm Smith medal game, he did have the 6 clangers and he only scored 92 in the grand final. I mean, sometimes people think, he scored the Norm Smith, he must have scored well. Not necessarily, and it's not all about SuperCoach points, but he did turn the ball over a little bit. So don't get drawn into thinking, he won the Norm Smith, he's a lock. Outstanding final series. Averaged 90.8 through the finals. I think he's capable of getting back to those good numbers, of course, if he does have another good pre-season, which he showed what he's capable of in the early parts of last season. But I'm just not fully sold on him. I just feel I'm a bit safer with other guys. Maybe your Adams, your Laird, your Doherty, your Shaw. Now, obviously, you're picking Johannesson to be a premium, probably jump up to around that 100. I guess just see what we saw early last season. And I couldn't argue with that because he is capable of it. He's shown us that he is. But I'm probably going to steer clear at this point because I think we saw some of his best footy in the final series and it didn't always equate to amazing scores, so I'll just need a little bit of convincing through the pre-season if I'm going to get on board him, and also to see how Murphy changes things up and just the dynamic of the whole Dogs half back line. And as I said with Bont, it's more likely that Johannesson will have a good year, but there is always the opportunity and the chance that he will cop a lot more attention and perhaps suffer from as a result, and he may struggle to really get off and run and win such easy ball and rebound at will. Might get a bit more attention. It's certainly worth thinking about because no doubt clubs do the most homework on the reigning premiers, so it's worth considering. And just finally, Tommy Boyd. Now, I'm probably Not going to sell you on this one, and fair enough, because I'm not going to pick him, but I think he is one that people have talked about, and he could be a real breakout contender. Now, $290,000 you have to pay for him. He is a forward ruck, which is very appealing. You know, people might like to make a bit of money off him and have that flexibility from ruck to forward. Now, of course, his grand final display was outstanding. Produced a brilliant game with 14 touches, 3 goals, 2, had the 14 hitouts as well, 6 contested grabs, 99 SuperCoach points, and kicked clutch goals. Now, as we've seen in the past, those sort of games and performances can really elevate a guy's game and give him the self-belief and confidence that he can do that week in, week out. The prime example, and a guy I compare him to, is Tommy Hawkins. You know, both big, monstering lads, key forwards, always been touted from a young age as being the next big thing, you know, key forward, outstanding player, and both burst out with great grand finals. Now, Tommy Hawkins, 2011, had a fantastic game. 3 goals, 3, 7 contested grabs, 117 SuperCoach points, and in that year he only averaged 69.6. But as a result of that, his belief was evident, took control of the Cats forward line, averaged 95.1 in 2012. Now, Boydie only averaged the 53.4 last year from his 11 games. Could he do something similar? Could he just all of a sudden take the game by storm and be one of the premier key forwards of the competition? I think it's possible. I definitely think it's possible. If I'm predicting averages, I'm probably saying mid to high 80s for Boydie. I think he's definitely capable of doing that, but he does have an enormous range. He could average from 80 to high 90s, I reckon. I mean, if he had a fantastic season, it isn't beyond the question that he could do something like that. Where does Trav Cloak fit into it all? We'll have to wait and see, but Boyd will be the main man. You'll have to assess his role, but if you're looking for a cheap ruck, I think you could do a lot worse than Boyd. A lot of people talk about Nankervis and Giles and Sanderlands. Well, Boyd's probably the cheapest of the lot, and he's not the worst pick. I think we could definitely see a big spike in his numbers. Is it enough to really go with him? I wouldn't have thought so, because it's enormous risk. I mean, he could just come out and have a reasonable season, average 75 or 80. You just don't know. I mean, we've seen key forwards have good seasons and only average in the 80s. Jeremy Cameron is a good example. Doesn't always average enormous numbers, but has played a good role, done his job, just not a big possession getter. So it's definitely worth weighing those sort of things up and what type of player they're going to develop into, but no doubt we'll see a spike in his numbers off the back of the confidence that he got from that grand final performance. And if he can be the main man, if he can all of a sudden be confident in what he's doing, start grabbing those marks, because he's a big unit, he's got a leap, he's a nice kick, I think he's a guy that is certainly capable of being up there in the top handful of key forwards. So we'll have to wait and see. I think he's relevant because of the forward ruck position. I think that's certainly one that gets people attention, and then you got to sort of consider it. So I thought I'd throw him in there, just get a bit of discussion going and see what people think. But that's all we got for the doggies. We'll round it up there. Reigning premiers, let's see how they respond next year. I think they'll be right up there again. They may tail off ever so slightly, but it's such a tight competition, it'll be good to see. But that's all we got for the previews as well. I've been enjoying doing these. It's been great to get through them all. They've been pretty well received on both YouTube and the SuperCoach HQ website. So thanks to everyone for joining in and commenting, especially Seb Franco, always comments, as does I Beat My Meat, I believe he's called. Interesting choice of name, but nonetheless he provides me a comment basically every time, I think. So thanks particular to those two guys. There have been a few others who have commented pretty frequently, but I think both Seb and him have been guys who have commented on, I'd have to say, every video, I think. So much appreciated on the support, so I thought I'd give you a shout out there. I'll be getting stuck into some more SuperCoach stuff soon. I might break for a week or so. I'll just see what happens in the footy world, but we'll certainly be leading up to it very quickly. It doesn't muck around, but I think I might do a few more positional previews and perhaps dual position guys, and I'll also think I'll do more specific player profiles, shorter videos, maybe 5 to 6 minutes on just one guy, and maybe we'll count down to perhaps the top 20 or top 30 most popular picks and get a bit of discussion happening there. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, subscribe to the channel as always. If you agree with something I said, let me know. If you disagree, by all means shoot me a comment and we'll have a chat about it. And it's all opinions around here at this time of year. It's what's great about pre-season. Everyone's got an opinion. We can all dream a bit. We can all cast our own crystal ball predictions, but it's all discussion and opinion till the season gets rolling. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks for listening to my podcast throughout the pre-season. Plenty more to come, and I'll catch you soon.